All right, everyone, welcome to our Cinco de Mayo Zoom session on COVID-19 and our plans to move forward. Before I get started, I wanted to take just a minute, one, to recognize folks wearing nice and cool hats and masks on Zoom land. I appreciate that. Um, I do want to say that we decided to host the Zoom session in Ed 201 today. And the reason that we're choosing to do that today is because March 13th was our first session and we held it right here. And there was a room almost filled to capacity, as well as a whole bunch of folks on Zoom land waiting to hear on what we're doing about COVID-19. And that was at the onset of our beginning to go online and transition out of campus. So the announcement that came out yesterday from UH is a transition back at the very least in its intent to communicate that we are returning to campus for fall 2020. Now that elevated a lot of emotions, I believe, including those of mine and my leadership team. I mean, we're all anxious over what that represents for Leeward. And I want to share that while that communication is intended to be what we follow, the way in which each of the campuses is following a return for fall 2020 is really dependent on our circumstances. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Not every campus has the same programs, not every campus has the same facilities. And so we all get now to think creatively in ways in which we could work toward a return in the fall. And what that means, it still hasn't been defined. And so I wanted to start by saying that because we don't have a formula that determines what's going to happen for the fall. All we know is that there will be things happening in the fall with a lot of different understandings relative to that return. One of them, like President Lassner suggested, it's not business as usual. So we're not expected to have the same level of services that we had here last fall. Okay, so that hopefully begins to alleviate some of our concerns. We've experienced through this spring that we are, in a pinch, able to transition a lot of our effort to remote services, including instruction. And that's not something that we necessarily want to undo for the fall. I do want to recognize a couple of challenges that a return in the fall represent for Leeward. And those challenges are ensuring that we're following Department of Health guidance and as to social distancing, as well as providing levels of services that our students need and maintaining health and safety as a top priority for our students and ourselves. And so we don't want to create a situation where we reverse the dial and then all of a sudden find ourselves in a more difficult situation. With that in mind, we are working already with connecting with our leadership from the governance groups as well as our admin team to brainstorm what fall will look like. So there's going to be an initial conversation over vision. What does fall 2020 look like? And then we're going to begin working on smaller work groups to help define what we will do operationally to get back in on the fall. So I'm going to pause there for just a second, and I'm going to go through some of the questions because a lot of the questions were about very similar topics, and I want to recognize that some of these had a lot of hits or volume, the same questions. I don't want to dismiss that. There are a lot of questions over what hybrid means for us. Well, we got to work on that as a campus. Faculty opting in or out of online. So whether we want to teach face-to-face or whether we want to teach online, that was a very popular question. What are our plans as an institution to ensure social distancing in place? What can we do over the summer? Okay, so we're talking about fall 2020. We haven't really addressed what's happening over the summer. Some questions revolved about when can we return? And then another really popular one was, what are we doing with enrollment caps for courses, especially in light of social distancing? And then one that I don't want to dismiss because I'm caught in this one is, what do we do with employees and students that have children that are DOE aged? So, they're in school and we don't know what's happening with those children, and any other precautions that we're taking for the return to fall. Long story short, I'm going to start, diving into some of these. We can't and won't unilaterally make decisions on things like course caps or what hybrid means or what classes go online, what classes are face-to-face, because those are all decisions that need to be informed. Not every discipline and course can transition easily online, and not every situation allows for classes to be face-to-face. And so we need to assess those in different buckets and have folks that represent the faculty, that represent our staff and our administration working together to some, solid solution over what we do for the fall. Hybrid, there have been different conversations, and I think it's because we're just brainstorming in what we could do best. And so is it a matter of a class that would typically meet twice a week? We have half of the students one day and half of the students the other day. Is it a situation where we have a class of, I'm going to call, say, 30, and we have 15 students in Zoom land and 15 students in a classroom? Is it a situation where we have 2 classrooms at the same time and probably close to each other on campus, one with the live instructor and the other one zooming it in to the rest of the class? There are very many options for what hybrid would mean, and so we have to have more conversations so that we could best inform these. But what I want to recognize are the challenges that we can have in swinging the pendulum either way. So if we decide to go all online, some of the folks in my admin team would be very happy because there is less to deal with if everything were to move online. But the challenge there is that some faculty are not comfortable online, as well as some students are not comfortable online. So we have to work on ensuring that we provide that service however possible. We're not going to satisfy everyone, and not everyone will be happy, but we do want to take those considerations. If we swing the pendulum over to a lot of stuff face-to-face, there is a facilities management issue in ensuring social distancing and hygiene. So it is very difficult on a day-to-day to ensure that every classroom gets a good cleaning. Now imagine having every classroom utilized and in between classes having a good cleaning. These are resources that are not necessarily identified and protocols that haven't been, developed. And so all of that is major planning that will contribute to how we move forward in the fall. And so if I've ever been considered or compared to a politician, this meeting just makes that so much clearer, because I don't have definitive answers for anyone, but rather the promise that we're gonna work together in setting a plan that's gonna get us through the fall. Major considerations to have in mind as well. If anything happens this fall, where there is a nucleus of COVID positive on campus, we may need to shut the campus down. And so our planning needs to have contingency tied to it, so that if anything that we have face-to-face were to have to be pulled, we want to have that in mind. And so our admin team has been working on brainstorming what type of professional development, what type of resources can we provide to students and faculty to fine-tune and make a transition back to online, if that's necessary, a little bit smoother than what we had this last spring. I can't tell you that I don't have major concerns over quality and accreditation. Okay, so it's a major concern that I have. ACCJC gave us, I'm not going to call it a free pass, but they realized that everyone's dealing with the same debacle of COVID-19. When fall comes around, there may be some allowances, but there's also going to be the recognition that we had the spring and possible fall to figure something out and make it better for the fall. Did I say fall for the fall?
Yeah, yeah.
I meant the summer for the fall. In any event, you know, we have a little bit of time for the planning. We can't expect to get to, you know, quality matters levels of distance education, but we can come to the point where we have stronger engagement with the student and stronger tools to ensure that the students are meeting the SLOs. And so all of that are major considerations. I'm going to swing over to a couple of areas. I'm going to seem very distracted, but I'm just trying to follow some of the questions. Outside of instruction, there are other offices that we also need to consider, whether it be faculty offices, counseling, financial aid. I mean, like all of our offices will have to follow some type of social distancing mechanism. Now, we've had a lot of offices functioning over the spring, but at a lesser face-to-face or physical capacity with some functions continuing online. And so if we are to have a return, or let me take that, not if, when we return in the fall, it may not be that all of your office mates are in the office. It may be that some of the functions are still happening remotely. And so there will likely be a major growth of distance learning students that are not coming to campus. And so some of the functions that we would do on campus can still happen remotely the way we've been managing so far. And so the expectation is that we manage this locally. And so because there are so many variables, I need to work with my leadership as well as the leadership from each of the groups, the faculty and other staff, to ensure that we're not leaving anything to chance. And so we're beginning some of the meetings. Some have already began happening just to coordinate a little bit. But everyone's going to have an opportunity to hear from me or from your direct supervisors what, you know, the ongoing plans are. We're going to try to continue disseminating information. And whether you know it or not, when we ask for anyone to submit stuff through the links in my emails for questions or comments, those are really a major resource to those of us that are beginning to figure out what we need to address for a return in the fall. And so we're going to continue collecting this feedback. There will be other avenues for collecting feedback. But what's important for me to mention, and I've shared this in various groups, this is not a typical decision-making process where we have oodles of time to exchange in ideas and have feedback come in through many different channels and 30 days to review materials. We're going to have to work a little bit more aggressively and a little bit faster because some decisions need to be made very soon. And so what we are going to begin developing is a timeline of issues and when we need to be making decisions by so that we're ready for the fall. And so some decisions may come as early as next week, and then we'll continue making those decisions and informing everyone along the way so that we're prepared for that fall transition. Another thing that's going to be important for us to realize is that when the fall comes around, it's likely that some areas may not even open or may open in a very slim capacity. There are still major concerns over the use of a cafeteria for eating in the cafeteria. It's possible that, like restaurants and other fast food places, I heard the governor today say that I think that the mall, the food courts. The food courts are going to open for takeout, but they're not necessarily going to have sitting area. So that's, again, to maintain that social distancing. So we got to re-envision what our fall is going to look like, okay? Are there going to be decisions that will be made for the fall that are a little bit different from what we've normally done? It's quite possible. For instance, considerations on class sizes, modality of instruction, etc. Some of these decisions, if we need to make them very quickly, they will be a gap-filling decision. So it'll be something that's not a decision that will change the way we operate indefinitely, but it'll be a decision that helps us get through the fall. For the summer, we don't have much to go off of at this point. There is a decision that needs to be made over summer session 2, which I think we have until May 15th. I have not heard if a decision has been made. I have not heard of it. But the way that I'm seeing things, it is likely that instruction will remain online in summer session 2. But that's just, I guess, my guesstimation. There are other conversations that are happening. For instance, we have a short list of classes that paused because of COVID-19, and we're waiting for an opportunity to come back to campus and finish those classes out. We don't have a definitive on that, but what I can tell you, and this should be a pretty vital sign for what's to come, over the last 2 days, I've experienced significant amounts of traffic compared to weeks prior. Mm-hmm. And so that's just, you know, the governor and the mayors are beginning to open certain businesses, which likely will impact UH. So we're going to begin, you know, being able to transition back to campus. I don't want to communicate at this point that everyone is welcome. We've never said that you couldn't come to campus. We want you to work from home whenever possible at this point. But I don't want to say that we want to return to some level of normal, because we don't have our ducks in a row to ensure, you know, health on campus. And so we are beginning to set up some protocols on how we could manage this moving forward. It'll likely be some metric-based type of mechanisms for X many classes, X many students. We have this much happening on the facility side. I want all of us to recognize that there are challenges in every area, not just instruction or facilities, but all of us have been facing some challenges, and I want to definitely consider those. The governor today had a press conference and another proclamation. And so slowly they've been loosening a little bit the belt on what can happen. And one of the questions that I think he has been getting hit with frequently is what happens with the employees that have students that don't have a summer option. If the DOE remains closed, the summer programs are not going to allow them to run in those areas. And for the few that are running, it may pose a health risk, but also it's not going to be enough to support every DOE kid that needs childcare over the summer. And so what allowances are being made there? Is there going to continue to be some telecommuting options? And I think that that's a relevant option always. But in our decision making and in the way in which we operationalize that telecommuting for us as employees, we want to remain fair. And so when actually it wasn't that long ago when we started talking about employees working from home and using the COVID-19 leave, we were having conversations that we still wanted some offices to operate in some capacity, and that the offices will have mechanisms to ensure that there's equity for employees and our students as our customers. I think that the roll back to opening in the fall is going to have a similar feel. We're going to begin having some folks staying at home, maybe rotating, opening in some capacity, and we'll continue to evaluate. One thing that I will not hide is that when we went from having some classes move online to having everything move online, we thought we were going to get a lot of students coming here to use the internet, to use common resources. And there wasn't that much volume, actually, of students coming in. We don't know if needs will be different when the fall rolls around, but it's something to consider. Now, I did get a very important question, and it came from relative to CARES funding, and I wanted to address that a little bit. For your awareness, and I know that I haven't been sending communications on this often enough, but it's because decisions haven't been made, and I don't want to confuse us in the process. But there is stimulus monies that's coming from the federal government to help alleviate some of the COVID-19 challenges. Some of this money is supposed to directly impact students only, meaning students' pockets. So we are the recipients of the money, but it's supposed to go directly to the student. The colleges, though, have an opportunity to define how that rollout happens. This CARES money, and if I miss it, someone remind me that there's 3 rounds. The first round equated to about $1 million for Leeward, and that entire $1 million is supposed to go to students. Initially, it was this blanket statement, and I think every college jumped the gun, and it seemed like a wonderful opportunity. And when everything began to mechanize, we got new information and guidance that restricted how that money was going to be utilized. That guidance came from the federal government. And so that $1 million that came and that was supposed to help alleviate some student financial issues is restricted now to only Title IV eligible students. And so Title IV eligible students have to meet certain requirements. And if they do, then they're eligible for this money. And so all of the community colleges came together and were using the very same mechanism. And I blasted a message out earlier today and as to how students would begin tapping into those dollars. This, however, we could tie to the Emergency Relief Fund, which is coming through the UH Foundation, and it's a little less restrictive. And so what's ultimately the goal, and I don't know how it'll really come together, but we're hopeful that all of the pieces fall in place, is that students exhaust one bucket and can move into the next if their needs continue to increase. We are going to have a pretty significant amount of money roll over to the summer/fall of this CARES money. So students can and will still receive some money. We will mechanize that later on. What's important right now, though, is that we don't miss the boat with the spring semester coming to an end and the student eligibility to get this money. So that went out today to students. Students should have began applying for it, and they're gonna get a check cut to them within the next 2 weeks or so. And so, or at the very least, their request needs to come in, and I should have written that down somewhere, but I think like May 12th, I'm making that up. But we put a deadline just to ensure that we hit that spring timeline. And then we'll roll over the rest of the money and come up with another mechanism. That's the first round of CARES money. The second round of CARES money, it's $1 million. And it's meant to alleviate some of the financial burdens imposed by COVID-19 on the institution. Now, what that means is that we can't subsidize cost, we can't supplant cost, we can't buy new toys with the money. It's meant to address whatever additional expenses came as a result of COVID-19. I'll give you one example. The PPE, okay, for our O&M staff. That's important. That was an additional cost. You could imagine with the low volumes of its availability and pricing going up and the frequency of changing that and the amount of cleaning that had to happen, that was an additional expense. So that would be eligible for COVID dollars. If there are other expenses that came as a result of COVID-19, then that we would be eligible to use that money for. There are other expenses that can come through that CARES money in preparations for the fall, for example. But we're gonna have to be very diligent in what we align to those expenses. The third round, we were more recently informed, and that is a round that's specifically geared toward minority serving institutions. So Title III dollars, many of you are familiar with. And that we just certified yesterday, I think. And it adds to an amount of about $1.7 million. I'll be honest with you, there's guidance and I haven't gotten to reading it yet. But we'll review what can be expensed through that. And so we do have some monies that are coming in to relieve some of the challenges. The challenge that we have right now is that in this current fiscal year, this is not our financially burdened year. It's next year. And so part of me wants to hoard the money until we know what next year looks like so that we can address it better. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're being responsive to the needs that are coming about. And so we're continuing to evaluate that. Once we have a better idea of what categories of expenses can fit into the 2 last rounds of CARES money, then we could begin being a little bit more creative in how to utilize that as we transition in. So long story short, the first round of that CARES money, which was supposed to really help all students, became so restrictive that I want to say maybe half of our students are really eligible. And that doesn't recognize, for instance, the students that we have on the non-credit side that generally don't get financial support, and that are actually in programs that may be able to assist during the current challenges that we're facing here in the state. So it's, you know, it's a balancing act. We're trying to be as resourceful as possible, but we do have those challenges.
I also have a few things that have popped up here.
Go for it.
One is, will faculty in vulnerable demographics be allowed to teach all online?
So that's a good question. So right now, again, like the politician that I am, I don't have an answer for you. What I could tell you is that if you are in a vulnerable population, that could be treated potentially as an accommodation. And in that sense, we can work with you. A blanket decision on opting in and out is something that we are not deciding on at this time, but it's something that we're evaluating as we plan for a return to the fall. And so what we want to avoid is the likelihood of there being no sections of certain courses that a lot of students that don't do well online are not offered face-to-face. So if everything goes online, it just creates a barrier for some of those students. But we'll balance that out, and we'll have more conversations over how that'll roll out.
Now, there's a little conversation about there are some students coming to campus to Wi-Fi. I just clarified that it was not in the numbers that we had anticipated. So there are, but it's not that many. We're also concerned about what happens if the funding is not distributed, and can we think of more creative ways to tell students to access the funds, since from a credible source, which I don't know the meaning of that anymore, that they're not, the applications have dropped off for
the urgent relief. Urgent relief, yes. And so I think that we've been,
that was the case message to faculty, though, was to remind, so faculty should have all gotten the message to remind all the students. So, and we also got that out through student government. So we're trying to go in a variety of ways.
It's very difficult to disseminate information when there's so much information to disseminate. What I can share is that last week we put together a 2-pager that went out to everyone. If you have, you know, distributions of students or a La Lima site or whatever, to post things there, because that's one good way of informing students. What I can tell you about urgent relief is that we've been reactive in areas where we don't have enough experience or data to know how it will perform. And so, like, we were prepping here to have oodles of people coming onto campus after we had closed. We weren't, you know, we weren't sure what to expect. With the relief funds from the foundation, it was a limited number of dollars. And so it was disseminated, and there were no other pushes because we thought we were going to exhaust the dollars. And so that's why we put in that information on that 2-pager. And now with this new message that students received about the CARES money, it hopefully will reinvigorate the use of this other funding source, especially because, I mean, the need for our students is probably gigantic. The cost of living here in Hawaii is huge. And so these nominal amounts are not gonna address a lot of need for our students, so they may wanna go into multiple buckets. As faculty and counselors and any staff and our administrators, if we are in a position to share that information, then we should. What I can tell you is that I have had a couple of conversations with our SGA leadership and the students directly, and they too have been very eager to get information and help disseminate. So whenever we have instances like that, we will share more of that information so that there's more traction in getting the students to get the resources. More questions? Wow. Okay, I did want to share, and it's not going to be me, it's going to be Mark. The food.
You're doing such a good job.
Go for it, Mark.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Just a word about
Can we ask if they can hear you? Because they couldn't hear me.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, 'cause
Can you
right
guys
now-
hear me? Can you confirm, please?
Yeah, we're getting thumbs up.
Okay.
Somebody's-
Thank you. We have a special event coming up on Friday, May 8th. I'll be sending out a formal email tomorrow and giving you all the details, but we're going to be a site for the city and county and Hawaii Food Bank's food distribution on Friday. I don't know if any of you experienced the traffic nightmare that was last week when the food bank and city and county distributed the food at the YPO soccer complex, but it was a nightmare to say the least. But this one is going to be far better coordinated. We're going to have an HPD detachment assigned to the campus, so about 20 officers will be here directing traffic. And so we're going to be also soliciting volunteers. So if you would like to volunteer for the food distribution event on Friday, there'll be a food bank form, volunteer form that I'll be sending out tomorrow with my email. And that's open to all employees and students to help our community. And I just want to give a shout out to Milton for getting the word out on the food bank and the good work that they do, especially during these times. So look forward to a great event on Friday.
All right. Any new questions, Kathleen? All right. I do have, we're always looking for an opportunity to shed some really positive information whenever possible. And, we've had an opportunity to exchange some words with some folks. But today, I want to announce some award winners publicly. And so our first award was that for a Board of Regents Medal for Excellence in Teaching, and that went to John Sr. The next award that I'd like to announce is Outstanding Lecturer Award, and that went to Loretta Chen. Our next award is Outstanding Service Award, and that went to Janelle Oshiro. And then our next award is Excellence in Online Teaching Award, and that went to Heather McCafferty. All right, this is really an opportunity, you guys. There is excellence all around. We are a resilient bunch, and we have done amazing at transitioning this COVID-19 period. We will do amazingly as we transition and move forward and look to this fall 2020 transition. I am, very optimistic of what we could put together as a plan, and just know that your interests are our interests, and so we'll be gathering more information as we begin to develop our plans moving forward. There are some unique circumstances, and maybe we could treat those as unique circumstances. I would be very pressed to make some decisions that are really blanket, but I do want to say that a lot of the work that happened to get us into the right place, a lot of commitment from everyone. I have had an amazing, amazing time transitioning into this new role and then leading the college during this difficult time. But I do feel that if there was a place for me to be living it, it's here, and this is a great team to have. I can't believe, and I sort of saw a number earlier, but I can't see it anymore on the screen, but there were like almost 150 people on these calls. That's an incredible level of engagement. I think everyone is willing to go that extra mile and just, bear with us as we continue to make some of these transitions. There are other questions that will begin to come in. We will send another link out so that those of us that are going to be part of some working groups have some some concerns that we should address in our transitions toward the fall. And again, flexibility is going to be important. And if something is, is not moving in the direction that you wanted it to, which is quite possible, work through your colleagues and your direct supervisor and ensuring that the leadership team is aware of it, so that we could continue assessing any challenge that may continue bubbling. And with that, I don't know, Kathleen, is there anything else that?
I'm just answering questions.
Wow. All right. Well, all I want to say is that, like I said earlier today, March 13th marked a very important day for us. And I think that, how history classes are subdivided by time periods. There'll be the pre-COVID-19 and then the post-COVID-19. I think that we all have these challenges. We're all learning and we're very resilient. I would love to see that as we begin to roll back into business, not as usual, but more usual than not, that we could begin meeting again in person, because I absolutely miss seeing all of you in person, and hopefully at some point we could begin exchanging lays and giving hugs. I miss that. But I would love to see Ed 201 filled again. I would love to see the Leeward Theater full of folks celebrating together some major accomplishments. And I think that we need to celebrate.
I have to chuckle out because they can't hear me. I said last call for questions because I wanted to pretend, we were in a bar. And there are some questions about the messaging that went out about the CARES funding to faculty sounding intimidating. So I said, but the students got a different message. So they want to know if we can share the student message with the faculty.
Yeah, I don't see why not. It's not private, so we'll work a way of getting that message out so that you could see the language in it. Totally. Any other questions? All right. Well,
yes,
with that,
yes.
Go for it.
Yeah, I do have a question. I sent about 3 and they got buried in Kathleen's notes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, and we can see you too, Gwen.
Oh, good. Okay, good. It sounded kind of tinny. Okay, so you addressed already that, it's hard to clean the classrooms. But one of the things I'm a little worried about is that the classrooms are so dirty that in terms of dust, that a lot of students who have dust allergies sneeze a lot and cough a lot in our classrooms. And that's going to panic everybody, even in social distancing when that happens. So I think at least in the beginning, we have to get all those classrooms really dust-free when we start. And then maybe we can try and keep it that way. If we have some dusting implements in our classroom, we can maybe keep that a little bit, dusted ourselves. So that's one thing to question whether that's possible. Can we clean them up? Do you want to answer that?
I don't want to necessarily respond for Mark, but I would say that if it was difficult before, now with more frequency and cleaning, it just poses a challenge, and we need to come up with protocols. But Mark, do you have any?
Yeah, we're certainly going to take the time that everybody's been online and through the summer to do as good of a job as we can to clean and disinfect all classrooms and public spaces. So for sure.
Okay, great.
What faculty can assist us to do, and I appreciate the offer of maybe having some supplies in the classroom and some touch up by the faculty or whoever in the interim. I think that's a great idea. But what I think would be helpful is for any personal things in the classroom to be identified so that we can remove them, because we don't want to clutter the classrooms with extra stuff, right, that our janitors may or may not be comfortable cleaning or doing something with, right? So anything that we can do to remove items from the classroom that aren't necessary would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Food drive again, people.
All the details on the food drive I'll send out tomorrow. I didn't want to get into it because there's a list of things that we'll have to consider. But I think the orientation begins at 7 a.m., okay? So all volunteers will have to go through a short orientation and get briefed on what their roles are going to be, proper protocols. The PPE will be issued to you. I think we'll have masks and gloves available to everybody who wants to volunteer. But there's a series of things that the food bank wants to work with any volunteers. And so they're asking, I think it's 7 o'clock, but I'll send all that information out tomorrow.
I have another question.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you, Gwen. You're supposed to type it.
I have two.
Okay, Gwen, I just like to let people know. You did not type your question in.
Yeah, I do.
chat.
I'm
gonna
reading.
unmute myself.
My question's in the chat. Yeah, it's in the beginning of the chat. You said you would share it later after he was talking. Anyway, so I'm reading off my chat question. So one of our lecturers who's going to be teaching up at Moku, a class of Moku in the fall, got contacted by somebody from the Hilo campus. I mean, not Hilo, Hawaii Community College, asking if she could take the class through Zoom. It's normally face-to-face, and she can only obviously take it through Zoom, so that would be an additional body in the classroom. But I'm wondering, how would we even do that, and is it allowed to teach most of the people live, and then maybe 1 or 2 students with Zoom? What do we need in the classroom if we were going to do something like that, which would up our numbers, but would we need like iPads that we can change directionally, or a dedicated computer in the classroom? I'm not sure how that would work.
I've heard of some of these. So I think that in higher ed we've evolved, because there used to be mechanisms like, courses through TV model, more or less, where you had a couple of people in different classrooms with a TV and an instructor at one location providing that instruction. Those are all possibilities. I think that they'd have to go through, K, and having the right technology and the right resources. It's an option, but.
If they're being asked to teach the class for another campus, there's a protocol that must be followed. Whoever is the home campus has to give permission and approval for an instructor to teach for another campus. And so if it involves technology, then we would assist in that matter.
Which
Well,
brings
it wouldn't be teaching for another campus. The students from a campus trying to finish her certificate, and the class isn't offered on her campus, so it's offered on our campus.
The same thing. We can talk offline on this, Gwen. Okay. But what it is it would be just a normal day at the office. We would have students from other campuses taking our classes.
Yeah, and one of the considerations that came up for sure in the questions and things that have been, people have been talking about is what the hybrid model looks like. And this is an option, like an offshoot of what hybrid would mean, where maybe we have the right technology in a classroom and we have 15 students that are taking the class face-to-face and 15 students that may be taking it at distance, but in a synchronous way. So there are some possibilities of making it happen. We just want to make sure that we're following the right protocol. So if we could connect that through K, I'm sure that we could, figure it out.
It's the old HITS program. And West Oahu was very famous. That's how they deliver their classes to the neighbor islands. And they would teach a class with some students present at Manoa, and they would televise the sessions out to the outreach colleges like in Kona or Maui. So we might have to go, how things come back full circle. We might be doing what we used to do. And don't forget, this is the last week of instruction. You can believe it. Oh, right at the end of the tunnel. Hope there's not a train coming. Anyway, remember your grades are due on Tuesday, May 19th, 3 p.m. It's imperative that grades be turned in on time, or even better, early, so the students can have access to them. And if they need to make that decision, if they want credit or no credit, it can be done, because their deadline, it's a tight deadline. It's May 22nd at 4 o'clock. So we appreciate everyone meeting their responsibility on time. So May 19th, grades done. You'll feel great after those grades get entered. So don't forget, through my UH. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so I brought this question up earlier, not here, but with Kay and Jim. My program has our interns for 200 hours usually in different agencies that engage in substance abuse counseling treatment. And so that's a lot to get over the span of a semester. And my concern is that we start a normal semester and they're going to be doing their internship there and things are going along fine. And then possibly we may have to go online if the COVID comes back. My concern then is that some of those learners will be given the opportunity to continue on because they're considered essential workers. Now, a lot of them want to get their hours done. They don't want to have it extended over into another year. So they may take that chance. But my feeling about that is if they choose to take that chance, then there should be some liability waiver. Now, it was brought up that I should be contacting James West for this, that it's somehow a union thing, but my sense is that it's more of a UH system issue because these are internships that are all over throughout the system. I don't see how it's a faculty concern.
Gwen, if the student is enrolled in your class and you give them an incomplete grade and then they continue on with their internship, they're still considered doing schoolwork, so they are okay. It's just if you give them choose to give them, let's say a B, because they've done the majority of the hours, but not all of them, and then they go work because they want to finish the hours for their certification, then that would be a liability issue for us because they're no longer a student. So those are things that probably need to be talked out with. I would definitely look into getting student insurance to maybe cover those people. I think some of the programs, like I think culinary has some kind of insurance that the students take while they're do their externships.
Well, we have that. We have malpractice insurance that they need to get, but and a lot of agencies require that because they're not included under volunteer. The volunteer umbrella. But my concern is that this is something beyond that. It's not about me giving a grade. It's that they are continuing in the site on their own throughout the rest of the semester. Some students say, I don't want to do that anymore. It's too dangerous. Others may say, no, I want to do it. I'm going to take the chance. I want to finish my hours. And so if they choose to do that, that's what I'm saying. We should have a waiver that they sign, liability waiver that they sign against UH.
There is a mechanism. There is a mechanism because I think that KCC has some health programs that are still moving forward. So we'll touch base with them to see what they are using to one, make the determination, and two, if there's any waivers that are being signed by students, because on that side of the house, the need is so high for those professionals that they're pushing the classes through
Exactly.
with technicals and all of that stuff.
Exactly. The nursing programs are doing that, and some of the health worker programs.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question about the process for students changing credit to no credit and what the deadline is.
Once the grades are entered in your class, the students have an opportunity to review the letter grade. That letter grade will be kept on file, but if the student opts to change to credit or no credit, there is a place that they will be able to click on, and I'll make sure you get this information again. Too bad Cammie's not here. Maybe Cammie can chime in. But the student deadline is May 22nd at 4 p.m. That's why a very short window from the grades are due on the 19th to the 22nd, they have that period of time to make a decision. And once that time goes by, they will not have an opportunity to check in. So Cammie, I think you're online. So can you chime in? I think it's Star GPS.
Yes. Hi, I'm here. So students can preview their grades in STAR. And the ability for them to see the unofficial grades has already been turned on for them. So the minute that you put your grades in, the minute that you submit your grades, students will be able to view them. Then they have until the 22nd at 4:00 p.m. to change the grading option for whichever courses they want to do that. And they change it themselves in STAR. After the 4:00 deadline, then they no longer have the option to change their grading option. There is a FAQ website that the university has put up for students. There's also one for faculty. It's really important that students go there and review the information in making the decision, because there may be impacts on them later down the line for choosing the credit, no credit option, depending on where they're headed, what other things they're involved with, such as VA benefits and those kinds of things. So it's important that they check that website and also to consult a counselor in making their decision. And so that's the basic process. Early college students also have this as an option. They can choose this. However, they really need to talk to their high school and also their early college counselor before choosing it. You know, especially because they may not be familiar with the credit, no credit option. It's different than how the DOE applies their different grading options. But also it has an impact on them both at the high school, on the high school record as well as the college record. So it's really important that they seek advice before they opt into it.
So we can push that announcement out to faculty again and ask them to post that as well as the FAQ link so that their students will be able to view that and make a right decision for themselves.
That was in the top part of the handout.
Yeah. All right, any additional questions?
Gwen's just apologizing to me.
Oh, that's not a question. All right, I do have a quick reminder for those of you submitting COVID leave. Don't forget Friday to submit your COVID leave. Nothing else?
Happy Children's Day, Happy Boys Day, Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
And being Japanese, I made my enchiladas.
All right, so we'll have a lot to celebrate, you guys. Thank you for hanging there, and we'll be connecting more. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
And